Continuing with Civilization or Chaos by Irene Conybeare. We're up to chapter 11, top of page 187. It's titled Prophecies. We should know that the world is passing through an avatar period, the signs of which are universal unrest and dissatisfaction with present-day life. What, therefore, is to happen when man accepts the truth that underlying the realities of life, there are fundamental laws and spiritual principles which cannot be violated or ignored? Only if these principles are respected can humanity rebuild on a broader and more equitable basis. What sound economic and political structure can there be without an enduring ethical foundation? The conflicting conceptions of life and the different social ideological experiments of our age have done nothing but bring about wars and enhance the general misery of the ignorant masses of mankind. How can the present welter of confused ideals produce that inner and outer harmony in human relations, indispensable for cooperation in ordered and peaceful progress? As we have said, the answer is that we must be taught to perceive spiritual values. There is only one reality. There is only one truth, which can unify the heart and produce love and harmony in our relations with one another. That reality is God. We see our world falling apart. How can we make a new world unless we have new men to make it? And how can we have new men without new hearts? We surely need a new order in which politicians are not alone, but are guided by the saints and sages. During the last 2,000 years, there have been many prophecies of some great impending change. There is no need to elaborate on the biblical prophecies. We will turn our attention to some others, while bearing in mind that prophecies are not reliable until verified, and that the seer's vision is colored by his own personal prejudices and mental limitations, unless he is one of those who have transcended Maya. Nevertheless, we know that many seers in different countries and in different ages have predicted stupendous upheavals and great changes of every kind in preparation for the new era. The world having reached a point in its development where the same forces which caused the great Atlantean island continent to sink beneath the waves are again active. We have an asterisk there. Research on the subject of Atlantis is being carried out by the Atlantis Research Center. See Atlantis Journal, Markham House Press, 31 Kings Road, London. Volcanoes dormant over long periods are again in eruption. Great natural catastrophes of every kind are on the increase. The late Max Heindel, who founded the Rosicrucian Fellowship in Southern California, wrote in 1917, before anything was known of nuclear fission and the atomic bomb, quote, "We know that upheavals and volcanic outbursts show us that subterranean activities are not suspended by any means. end quote. He had seen, parentheses, clairvoyantly, great subterranean caverns filled with oil and gas, which run in a southwesterly direction from Maine across the American continent, beneath Southern California, and far out under the South Pacific Ocean. He thought that their ignition and explosion might make a great gap in the Earth's surface. At the same time, he saw an archetype in process of construction, which shows that a great change will take place in the world when a cataclysm or a series of cataclysms has broken up the present continent of America and the adjoining seas. This may seem an impossible prediction on the part of Heindel, but as he says, we should remember how half a century before America was discovered, quote unquote, Mother Shipton, the Yorkshire seeress, prophesied the discovery of an unknown land in which gold would abound. She saw many things of the future, including railways, automobiles, airships, and the great iron vessels which would supersede the wooden ships. She foresaw great political upheavals, notably that of France, the alliance of France with Britain, and the amalgamation of Anglo-Saxon races, which has not yet come to pass. She beheld the emancipation of the Jew and the unprecedented spread of knowledge amongst those of even the most lowly estate. As Heindel says, she ended with a prediction of certain upheavals of the Earth's crust, whereby old lands will become submerged and new lands will appear. She foresaw the end of the world in 1991. Have not Nostradamus and others said much the same? This, however, means only the end of a cycle. Heindel goes on to say that perhaps it is hazardous to set the time when the remodeling of the Earth will begin. But the archetype or matrix, molded in mind stuff and representing the creative thought of the grand architect and his builders, seems so nearly complete, judging by the progress made during the years Heindel had watched its construction, that he thinks it safe to say that by the middle of the present century, about 1950, if not before, the upheavals will have started. So it is not at all incredible that shortly there may be one of such magnitude that Mother Shipton was justified in believing it to be the end of the world. Or perhaps, as Heindel goes on to say, he may be premature in judging that the upheavals will start in the middle of the century. They may be deferred until its end. We shall soon know, for only time can tell. But certain it is that great preparations are going on in the invisible world and have been going on for centuries and are now nearing their completion. Just before leaving America, as I was saying goodbye to Mrs. Max Heindel, who, like her husband, is also clairvoyant and a notable astrologer, I asked what she thought about her husband's prophecy concerning the breaking up of the American continent. She then told me that she had recently had two visions in which she had been shown a huge mass of land being pushed up out of the sea off the coast of Southern California. This event, she said, would cause tidal waves of immense size. Mercaron's father, Papa, would you care to read? I see you there. You have to unmute first.
Okay, Baba.
I will read it.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Go ahead.
Yeah. The reader might ask, what is going to happen to England? In the beginning of the last war, when England was fighting desperately with her back to the wall, practically unaided and unarmed, Meher Baba remarked, England must and will win the war. Shown of her pride and complacency, she will become senior partner in a real Commonwealth of Nations. The war has never really ended, but there are signs that this Commonwealth is coming into being. Britain could not have come through the First World War if her survival had not been divinely ordained. For was she not saved before by divine intervention? We all know the legend of the angels of Mons. We had only a thin line of khaki between us and the German hordes. The position was untenable, absolutely desperate, and the British could not hope to hold them back. An eyewitness of the supernatural event, which then happened, a British officer, said, the air was full of shining ones. I then knew we would not fail. It was believed by some of the time at the time that the explanation of the Germans not breaking through was that some of their observers saw behind the British lines great concentrations of reinforcements which did not really exist, so that the Germans waited instead of pushing on, and Britons were saved. The skeptics will remark that it was the taxi cabs of Paris which saved the situation. Then again, what happened in the early part of the Second World War? Are we ungrateful enough to maintain that we did not have divine intervention in the form of the miracle of Dunkirk? This time, the small British army was again en route. The English Channel, ordinarily never really smooth, became like a mill pond, and the great black cloud caused by exploding oil tanks screened the remnants of the withdrawing troops from the enemy. Small craft of all kinds had been collected from all over the British Isles and had crossed the water along with the navy to take off the survivors of our retreating forces. Men and officers waded into sea nearly up to their necks, clambering into the boats just in time. Meanwhile, the heroes who fought the rear guard actions delayed the enemy till the whole army had come across. Students of history have often speculated on the strategic blunders of Hitler. Why? After the Dunkirk defeat, did he not immediately invade England before America could re-equip our shattered forces? Instead, Hitler overran France and did not concentrate on England. when he had her at his mercy? Why also did he not invade Turkey before sending his troops to Russia? Why did not Japan follow up her initiative after Pearl Harbor by bombing defenseless American cities? For at that time, America had practically no aircraft. It seems a mystery that she missed her opportunity. The solution to all these riddles is a spiritual one. History has ever shown the designing finger of God. The possible developments suggested above were not part of the divine plan. I do not think it is irrelevant here to mention that I had two symbolical dreams concerning the future which were indirectly connected with America. They took place some years before 1939. I dreamed that a relative and I were standing outside our home, looking up into the sky above a London park. High in the blue heavens, an enormous, angry storm cloud was massed above us. Out of it pointed the long black muzzles of four great guns, two to the east and two to the west. This means another war, I exclaimed. Then a voice spoke. God has been blasphemed. He is angry. He is now going to speak. Much perturbed in my dream, I ran upstairs, but when I came down, it seemed that God had already spoken. Turning to my companion, I asked, well, what did God say? I thought he was just going to tell me, but I woke up. The following night, before falling asleep, I wondered what the dream meant. It was a warning, a presage of something terrible to come. What was the voice of the God? I thought of the still small voice, the voice of silence. Whatever one's conscious, whatever one's conscious, the inherent sense of moral obligation. Our conscience, which guides us or should guide us, was by no means infallible. One has only to think of the foul deeds done by individuals and nations in the name of conscience. The question of guidance was very difficult. I thought of the things a man will do under the impression that he has God's guidance. How far could we depend on our limited human conscience, which led so many astray? When did guidance come from a really higher source? Still, at times a voice did speak, sometimes loudly, sometimes softly. There was the eternal voice which had spoken so loudly into my ear the words, "This is not reality," that I had turned round sharply to see who was speaking, but nobody was there. This strange incident took place at the beginning of my quest for truth. The words had conveyed nothing to me at the time, and I just dismissed the experience as an hallucination. Some years later, however, I was to appreciate the meaning. Then there were the spiritual experiences, which we cannot go into here, but which enabled me to realize that there were unknown realms outside the mind. All through the ages, man has had messages from sources outside his usual self. In some cases, these have been genuine divine revelations from his higher self. The supreme intelligence would express itself sometimes symbolically and sometimes directly. If, according to the dream, God was going to speak, there must be some coming cosmic revelation. There are many who thought that a great crisis in human history was on its way. Was there to be the war of wars, Armageddon? Was the word again to be made flesh? Would there be some form of divine intervention to stop man's total destruction of himself? Was that why God would have to speak the word again made flesh?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll take a turn now. That night, as I fell asleep, I prayed, "Good Lord, please give me another dream. And this time, tell me what is going to happen, when and where." I had the answer that same night. This time, I was walking quietly along the bank of a wide and peaceful river. I noticed a clump of unusual white flowers on the path. They were outstanding in their beauty, strange flowers I had never before seen. The landscape was tranquil, and all seemed at peace. I noticed that people were walking about unconcernedly. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed, for I had turned round and saw something gleaming white away up the reach of the river. It was very far off, but as I watched, I could see this glint of white was the white crest of a huge tidal wave. It was coming very slowly up the river. "Good gracious," I cried, "we shall all be drowned." For I could now well see that this slowly advancing crest would, in time, flood all the ground, which spread in a flat expanse to the far horizon, the plains of civilization. As I searched for a means of escape from the oncoming doom, I noticed that my path, parentheses, symbolizing the mystic path, which is called Sair by the Sufis, wound away in the distance to a curiously shaped hill. This hill stood up out of the plain. It resembled a pyramid. It was the way to safety. "We must all make for that hill. I must warn the people." As I shouted, I woke up. The dreams plainly indicated the coming catastrophe, which would slowly overwhelm our present civilization. But at the time, I understood nothing of the significance of the pyramid-shaped hill. Later, I discovered that the pyramid signified the mystical triangle, which is the symbolical meaning for the soul's journey through creation, back to itself, the divine self or oversoul. The soul is not part of creation, but is as much inside it as outside it, in the sense that creation is but an illusion and not reality. The white flowers on the path, the mystic path, stood for purity, the necessary purification of our consciousness, if we were to progress towards the ultimate goal. While at that time I could appreciate the nature and meaning of the two dreams, I could not see how I could help others or enable them to escape. While meditating on my dreams, I remembered the words of a strange man whom I had met some years previously in Central Europe. He had explained some strange events regarding the new spiritual dispensation to come, and had insisted that Jesus and the apostles, already reincarnated, were again on earth, preparing for their new mission. He also told me a little of what was going to happen and how every living creature would get some form of spiritual rebirth in proportion to the degree of its spiritual development. He even told me that I should do what I should do in the new awakening to come. When I skeptically protested, he retorted sardonically, but you do not know what the Spirit can do. The Spirit can change even you. While reminiscent, I recalled the curious message I received some years before I met this man. My hand wrote, quote unquote, automatically, you will belong to a new movement of an entirely new nature in connection with the unseen world. We want you to write a book on Christ's teachings in relation to modern thought. I remember I thought that a theologian would be much more suitable, and to my surprise, the answer came back, no, you are a very suitable medium for the coming revelations to humanity. Needless to say, I was not interested, but I did note down this strange communication. Now, many years later, I find myself attempting to explain Christ's teachings in relation to modern Eastern metaphysical thought. That has an asterisk. To critics who may consider I am too dogmatic or categorical, I ask that it should be realized from the beginning that I do not mean to be controversial. I have merely endeavored to interpret the philosophy of the master, and my work is primarily for those who believe on him and his mission. As many of my statements demand in themselves books of explanations, I feel that readers can, if they choose, study the sources referred to, since they are the basis of much of the material which may be questioned. At that time, I knew nothing of the silent saint of India, nor his message to the world. If God was going to speak, then it must mean the word would again be made flesh. Some divine manifestation in human form, which would tune in the cosmic wavelength, releasing the dynamic spiritual voltage, which would recharge the stagnant consciousness of men. Some believe the universe is constructed upon the vibrational quality of tone. Our globe is certainly a discordant symphony, with all members of the orchestra playing different tunes. It has been said that the entire world is a musical instrument, and the pole of the world celestial is where the heavenly chord is divided by the spiritual sun. And that asterisk said that the note says that that quote is unknown as to where it came from. According to Socrates, on the upper surface of each circle, there is a siren going round with it, humming a single note, and these together form one great harmony. This can be sensed by all who have heard the celestial harmonies of the spheres. Pythagoras evolved the doctrine of the music of the spheres on the number 7 for the purpose of the 7 spheres or planes of inner existence is the transmutation of matter into spirit. Esoteric knowledge points to the theory of the material world changing into the subtle world, which again will change into the mental world. Gradually, new states of being are born, leading us to that event described by Tennyson. One God, one law, one element, and one far-off divine event to which the whole creation moves. Mary, could you unmute and continue?
Yeah. I can't see the first line. Yeah. Thanks. Corinne Helen, in her booklet Healing and Regeneration Through Music, writes on this theme. A study of the symphonic aspects of the cosmic pattern and its relation to musical science as we know it offers not only an absorbingly fascinating field for occult practical application that goes far to remove in our consciousness the sense of separateness that now exists between the seen and the unseen, the material and the spiritual. When the fact of universal relationship becomes a living truth in our consciousness, we truly know ourselves as a part of that one in whom we live and move and have our being. Every creative thing, from molecule to man, possesses a keynote of its own. The sum total of all these notes makes up the music of the spheres. The magic flute of Krishna and the harp of Orpheus drew all men to them. He who has heard the distant fluting of the pipes of Pan swell into a cosmic orchestra of sublime celestial harmonies knows full well that these pipes are the symbolic urge of the soul to find itself, for God is the supreme conductor of the heavenly orchestra, as Kabir sings. There where my Lord is seen self-revealed. Okay, I need to read it. There, where my Lord is seen self-revealed, there reigns the spring of the Spirit. There, the unstruck music, the song of the Holy Spirit, sounds of itself. There, the streams of light flow in all directions. Few are the men who can cross to that shore. 3 millions of Krishnas stand with folded hands. 3 millions of Vishnus bow their heads. 3 millions of Brahmas read the Vedas. 3 millions of Shivas are lost in contemplation. 3 millions of Indras dwell. Oh, it's all the time. There millions of Vishnu. There millions of Brahma. I need to read that. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay. There, where my Lord is seen self-revealed, there reigns the spring of the Spirit. There, the unstruck music, the song of the Holy Spirit, sounds of itself. There, the streams of light flow in all directions. Few are the men who can cross to that shore. There, millions of Krishnas stand with folded hands. There, millions of Vishnus bow their heads. There, millions of Brahmas read the Vedas. There, millions of Shivas are lost in contemplation. There, millions of Indras dwell. There, the demigods and the munis are unnumbered. There, millions of Saraswatis play on the veena. There, in those depths, dwells the scent of sandal and flowers. Laboratory work by science is even now beginning to rediscover and verify these ancient truths, which will one day be accepted. But few at present can do more than sense the vibratory rhythms which uphold and enfold this planet. It was not till some 5 years after my dream about the pyramid, when in America, that I understood something of its import. All national symbols and images are related to a nation's inner life, as well as to its outer life. For such symbols are the focal points, as it were, for the transmission of the spiritual force which influence and guide humanity. They help to bring about the unfolding of the consciousness of a particular race. Those who are acquainted with the language of symbolism may be able to discern the character and destiny of a nation. In America, I discovered that on the reverse side of the Great Seal of the USA is stamped a pyramid. This pyramid is constructed of 13 blocks, symbolizing the original 13 colonies of America. No one has ever discovered how the pyramids of Egypt were built or how old they are. Some say they were built by the Atlanteans and are far older than estimated by the archaeologists. Since there are other pyramids in other parts of the world, including China, they suggest a unity of hidden knowledge. The initiates gave them to the world as symbolic representations of the spiritual growth of humanity. In looking at the pyramid inscribed on the Great Seal of the USA, it will be noticed that the capstone hangs suspended on the top and is not in place. The suspended stone has an eye in it, the all-seeing eye of God. Light radiates from the stone. The same pattern is on the dollar bills. All these interesting signs symbolize a great spiritual growth in the States, but only after she has experienced the purifying and purging flames of tribulation. It is sad to think that the hope of the Western world, where the standards of living are the highest and the happiest, should have to suffer, but she too has to play her part in the world passion. This reminds us that some 2 centuries ago, George Washington had his famous vision in which he saw a dark, shadowy being like an angel floating in mid-air between Europe and America. He was given to see the three great disasters to afflict American soil: the War of the Rebellion, the Civil War between North and South, and finally the war which has yet to come. We will close.
So that asterisk referred to this book, I guess, Prophetic Years by Wing Anderson, USA. Thanks, Mayor. I'll take a turn now. We will close this chapter by giving Baba's warning as described by Dr. Donkin in his book, The Wayfarers. It was in October 1945, the period of Baba's seclusion on the Angiras Rishi Hill. This is a forest-clad mountain in one of the wildest parts of the central provinces, so teeming with game that huge fires had to be kept burning to keep the wild animals away from the summit of the hill where Baba chose to spend his seclusion. Imagine a verdant forest cloaking the harsh contours of a broken mountainous tract. And in the curving vales, brooks and rivulets, babbling over the stones to join the sacred Mahanadi, whose source lies only a few miles away. Oh, sorry, I lost my place. Okay, here we go. In the days of old, it is said, 4 great rishis passed their lives in these lonely forests and in the scattered hamlets that lie between the hills. The tales of these great saints are still handed down from one generation to another. The 4 rishis were known as Angiras Rishi, Shringi Rishi, Muchkunda Rishi, and Kunmag Rishi. Jal Karawala, to whom Baba had entrusted the selection and preparation of a suitable place for his seclusion, chose the hill connected with Angiras Rishi. He gave orders for a hut to be built on its summit, had the rough track to the foot of the hill made passable for cars, arranged for men to bring water, milk, and vegetables up the hill, and in short, saw to all the details of making Baba's retreat smooth and easy. Baba and his men came to this wild hilltop on the last day of October, and for 4 days, Baba spent most of the day sitting alone with Ali Shah, one of Baba's favorite 5th Plain musts, in a hut which had been prepared for the must on the lower slopes of the hill. Thereafter, Ali Shah was sent back to Ahmednagar, and for the final week, Baba continued his silent work alone in his special hut on the summit of the hill. On one of these latter days, Baba emerged after having sat for many hours in complete seclusion, his face more drawn and weary than Adi ever remembered having seen it, and said that a gigantic disaster would overwhelm the world that would wipe out 3/4 of mankind. Adi was deeply stirred, not only by the anguish on Baba's face, but also because he spontaneously dictated these words immediately on emerging from his seclusion, as if the work done during that seclusion had been specifically related to the world passion of which he spoke. 9 years later, in September 1954, Baba, when describing his death, which has to be a violent one by means of assassination, stated that at that fatal moment, he would break his silence in the one word, Om, which only God could utter. Then our planet is expected to give a shudder and the great disaster will occur. This cosmic catastrophe, as the Master has explained, will force the remaining 1/4 of humanity to come together in peace and amity, and it will unite to bring about a real brotherhood of man, which will be the prelude to the golden age. Here, no doubt, the skeptics will poo-poo such a calamity, but do not increasing warnings from scientists as to the dangers of continuing hydrogen bomb explosions causing permanent increase in world radiation have to be considered? Is not there the possibility of world suicide apart from a third world war, unless the masters behind the scenes arrest such an insane and suicidal development by putting an end to the present state of affairs? Chapter 12, Jesus and Avatar. As already stated, creation came into being to enable man as the individual soul to recognize his own true nature and his divine origin. His origin is the Oversoul, God Almighty, Paramatman, Yazdan, or by whatever name he is known. He is always none but one. In the West, we have to get back to forgotten truths, that man is God and that God men do exist. All who come under the influence of a perfect master come not only to look upon the master as God, but to accept the thesis that every man is God. In fact, they come to realize God in everything. This, in a sense, is a contradiction and amounts to admitting the existence of innumerable gods, though insisting that God is one. To meet this difficulty, we must repeatedly stress the duality of creation and the cosmic illusion of Maya. We must emphasize the fundamental truth of existence, namely that man, once arrived at human form, has ended his evolutionary career so far as the physical development is concerned, and having thereby attained his human consciousness in full, should now begin to realize his real mission in life. When he arrives at inspiration, born of experience in the subtle world and the illumination of the mental world, he will begin to grasp the fact that the annihilation of the false ego will bring his transformation into the real and only self, which is always one with everything. So we should constantly stress to ourselves the words, I am man, I am God. Mayor, could you unmute and continue, please?
Again, the first line. Remember always that no matter when and where Man is always one in the highest experience of truth, namely self realization. In the same strain as a celestial song of Krishna, we find several thousand years later that Galaluddin Rumi sang in one of his famous odes, which begins, I am the theft of the rogues, I am the pain of the sick, I am the pain of the sick, I am both cloud and rain. Modern psychology, by accepting the hypothesis that the object of creation is to bring the unconscious into the realm of conscious, should discover the hidden truths of existence. But how can this be done? Only through the impulse of love, for love is the mainspring and motive force of creation. As we know, man's concept of God varies according to his degree of culture. How far is it possible to explain the nature of God? Within the limited focus of our mind, so far as it is possible, we can say that God is love. That is to say, God is divine love. Divine love is very far removed from human love, ordinary human love. Let us begin by analyzing the various aspects of love. First of all, in nature, there is a love of inanimate things, the power of attraction. In the negative and positive units, that is to be found in chemistry and physics. Then comes love in the vegetable kingdom, shown in the pollination of trees and plants. Then there comes a love of sentient creatures, reptiles, birds, and animals. Love is to be found in all animate things. But the love which animals, whether domesticated or otherwise, can show to one another and to human beings is proof of the capacity of their love instincts to rise to a very high level, often to the extent of individual sacrifice. Finally, there is human love, which has some of the aspects of animal love, but is altogether on a higher plane of consciousness. It is of the exceedingly complicated nature, for man is an intricate and contradictory creature. Selfless human love, the highest aspect of all, is very rare and can never be of a totally impersonal nature till man has achieved perfection and ended his evolutionary career. We must never confuse human love with the love of our divine self, which is God. All love comes to me, said Krishna. All mystics have felt the love of God, have experienced that inner glow. Those divine rays, warm, palpitating vibrations, as if the love of heaven was being poured down to envelop and caress them. It is impossible to feel the ecstasy of a spiritual experience without this divine love, which is the birthright of every soul. Saint Augustine said, man is what he loves. And Eckhart's comment thereon reads, if a man loves a stone, he is a stone. If he loves a man, he is a man. If he loves God, I dare not say more, for if I said he would then be God, he might stone me. Divine love brings about the annihilation of the animal self or false ego, and finally union with the divine self. In the words of Meher Baba, it is for the sake of love that the whole universe sprang into existence. And it is for the sake of love that it is kept going. God descends into the realm of illusion because the apparent duality of the beloved and the lover is eventually contributory to his conscious enjoyment of his own divinity. God has to suffer the apparent differentiation into the multiplicity of souls in order to carry on the game of love. They are his own forms, and in relation to them, he at the same time assumes the role of the divine lover and the divine beloved. He is their real and ultimate savior, drawing them back to himself. Though the whole world of duality is only an illusion, that illusion has come into being for a significant purpose. Love is a reflection of God's unity in the world of duality. It constitutes the entire significance of creation. If love were excluded from life, all the souls in the world would assume complete externality to one another, and the only possible relations and contacts in such a loveless world would be superficial and mechanical. It is because of love that the contacts and relations between individual souls became significant, and love, which gives meaning and value to all the happenings in the world of duality, is at the same time a standing challenge to duality. As love gathers strength, it generates creative restlessness and becomes the main driving power of the spiritual dynamo, which ultimately succeeds in restoring the consciousness of the original unity of being. And there's an asterisk. Discourses of Meher Baba.
Oops.
Continuing. Here, some may object that the whole animal creation is based on the systemic extermination of one creature by another, on a cruelty expressed in their instincts. Anyone who studies natural history might well come to this conclusion. The only answer we can give is that pain and suffering had to be to bring about the spiritual evolution of the creature and to enable man eventually to recognize the divine within himself instead of remaining indefinitely separated from God, his divine source. The existence of various degrees of illumination leading to the superconscious states is well exemplified in the lives of the saints, both Eastern and Western. There are also the mystical inspirations of less exalted individuals. Even a minor state of soul awakening can transform the life of a man, now much more so when an advanced stage of initiate how much more so when an advanced stage of initiation into the life of the spirit takes place. There are many records of the transcendental revelations of the soul experienced by the Illuminati who have made their mark on religious history. There are also the great waves of evangelism which sweep over the masses who suddenly feel their need for God. Even 2000 years, roughly the sun enters another sign in the every 2000 years, roughly the sun enters another sign in the zodiac, And we are now approaching the Aquarian age. Every age brings with it a new culture, a new philosophy of life. This implies an immense outpouring of spiritual energy and the quickening of man's spiritual nature. Hence, a divine manifestation of the Avatar is expected in the near future. Humanity has always welcomed and acknowledged every fresh dispensation of the truth as embodied in the great ones and world teachers. But it is recognized that as the divine influence of these masters recedes into the dim and distant past, their teachings become separated more and more from other teachings. No connection between the various faiths is sought, no common inspiration is admitted. Yet all the great world religions have been founded on the same principles. Fanatical supporters of each religion would insist that their prophet and their avatar alone was the only one and the true teacher of all time, and that every man outside was a heretic, an infidel, or a pagan. Yet all the original founders taught peace and the brotherhood of man. All the masters have stressed the same principles, namely the continuity of life, the forgiveness of sins, the trinity of manifestation, and the communion of saints. Today, Baba says, it is time religion goes in parentheses, meaning rituals, ceremonies, creeds, and dogmas. End parentheses, and God comes. Some Christian apologists interested in the comparative side of religion insist that the life of Jesus is completely unique. That in fact his life is incomparable. This is a characteristic defense of most of those holding office in Christian churches. The explanation for this narrow view is that there is insufficient acquaintance with the principles and spiritual laws which govern creation, and also insufficient practical knowledge of the truths and realities behind the teachings of Jesus and other great masters. Swami Vivekananda spoke of religion in the highest sense when he said, religion is a manifestation of divinity already in man. It is to be wondered that no original Christian research has been made into the unknown life of Jesus before his baptism, apart from some facts of his childhood. But there are legends from Muslim sources that he visited India. Also, his visit appears to have been definitely recorded in Hindu and Buddhist sastras. There is, so we understand, an ancient Tibetan manuscript at Marbar said to date from about the time of the crucifixion, which states that Jesus came to India at the age of 13. That is easily possible since even in those days there were long caravan trips to India. It is reputed that Jesus visited Sindh, Puri, Benares, and Nasik. It is thought that many great teachers have visited India, the homeland of spirituality. There is no real reason to suppose that the pattern of life of Jesus differed from that of the other great avatars of history. Jesus seems to have had some of the same peculiar characteristics of Krishna and other masters, which accounts for the riddles of the Gospels never having been explained.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll just go to here tonight and continue next week. Thank you.